Okay, friends, we're going to go deep tonight, so I hope you're all ready. This is not going to be your run-of-the-mill easy class. We're going to be discussing something which is so pertinent and so real that it's making the news every single day. And that is, we're going to talk about the war of Gog and Magog. We're going to talk about Mashiach Achar Yamim. And we're going to talk about signs that we're seeing today that I want to show you, and it's going to be very clear by the end of the shiur, God's willing, that we are on the cusp. I mean, we all know this. The Jews know this. The Muslims know this, right? The Christians know this. Everyone knows something very big is happening in the world. Nothing happens by coincidence. I wrote a book on Mashiach about 4 or 5 years ago. Baruch Hashem, it did okay. It sold 400 or 500 copies, and then you just give out copies whenever I speak somewhere. Since October 7th, when I was actually in Israel for that event, till now, 3,000 copies. I mean, it's just, we were out of print. You know, we have to reprint now. So this has become a very, very popular topic. I've got a lot to say, a lot to get through, and we're going to get going right now. If you have any questions, do feel free to stop me. I'll be very happy to answer any questions that we have, but I got a lot of information to get through at the same time. With maybe 40 minutes, is that good enough, guys? Yeah, 40, 45 minutes. Let's get through as much. Keep eating, if you will. Okay, let's just get back to the basics, my dear friends. We know that Jewish history has a 6,000-year maximum. Right now, we're on 5784. We're moving into 5785. Okay? We know that Jewish history is going to end with a very good thing. The coming of Mashiach. It's going to be a king. I'm just summarizing the basics. He's going to be a king in the land of Israel. He's going to be a king for the entire world, but his central station is going to be in Israel. His throne is going to be in Yerushalayim. We're going to see the building of the third and final Beit HaMikdash. That's actually one of his jobs, is to build the temple, and according to the Rambam, is one of the proofs that he is Mashiach. Okay? That he actually builds the third and final temple. And that must be on Temple Mount. Now, if that were to happen tomorrow, my dear friends, World War III, 4, 5, and 6 would erupt immediately. However, it's going to happen. As well as that, we're going to see the return of all the Jewish people to the land of Israel, which, if you think about it, is probably going to take months, if not years, for that actually to happen. Before all these things happen, so we're now going to talk about the pre-Messianic era. Before that happens, the prophets speak about a great war and great challenges that are going to happen to our people. This war is called Gog and Magog. And there is a big dispute among the rabbis, because it hasn't happened yet, who are the nations involved in Gog and Magog. And this war, which we're going to see is a physical war, as well as a spiritual battle, is going to be so challenging, my dear friends, that there were rabbis who mention this explicitly in the Gemara, Rabbah and others, that say they would rather not be alive when Mashiach comes. That's how challenging the world is going to be like before Mashiach comes. And tonight we're going to learn a Mishnah. A Mishnah, not even Kabbalah. We'll do a little bit of Kabbalah later. The commentary of the Abarbanel, which I have become obsessed with in the past few weeks, on Sefer Daniel, where he speaks a lot about, he brings in Kabbalistic understandings, which are a lot to talk about as well. We may have time at the end. But we're going to go with the basic information. What is Gog and Magog? What's going to happen? Because all of this is predicted and spoken about. So that is a summary of what we're going to work on this evening. Are we cool? Yes, Rabbi? Any questions so far? If I say a term in Hebrew and you do not know what that term means, I'll be very happy to try to translate for you. Sure.
So like the year 6000,
by that is the cutoff point by which Mashiach must come. Having said that, the prophet Isaiah does say at the end of chapter 60, Be'ito achishena, 2 very important words, which means he's going to come in his time. And most rabbis believe Be'ito refers to at least by the 6,000th year. But achishena means that we have the ability to expedite, to speed up the arrival of Mashiach through various things that we're able to do in order to bring the redemption earlier. I want to just What? We don't want to prolong it. You don't want the world to carry on as is, because what you're stopping with the arrival of Mashiach is war and anti-Semitism. And we don't want that to go any longer, right? I think we've all had enough of that. Dayenu, when it comes to the anti-Semitism, what we call with that, that's actually called the Rambam, Ariel, the main difference before Mashiach comes and after he comes. The Rambam and others in that realm say the world's going to carry on as is, but there'll be no more war or destruction. The Jewish people will be able to live in peace in their homeland, Israel. The Ramban, Nachmanides, and the Kabbalists say the world is going to be completely different. You won't be able to recognize the world. It's going to be a complete AI world. He doesn't say that, by the way. He does not mention AI, because, he's around like 1,000 years ago. But that is the opinion of the Ramban and others. Are we cool? Great. I want to start with a Mishnah at the end of Tractate Sotah. I'm going to read through the Mishnah. And this Mishnah talks about what the world is going to be like right before Mashiach comes. And when I read it to you, you're going to be like, OMG, this could be read on Fox News or CNN or the New York Times, probably not the New York Times, but any other major mainstream media when I read this description of what the world's going to be like right before Mashiach comes. So the idea, the thread, as you're going to see, that runs through this Mishnah is that the world is going to go through a radical change which is going to lay the land ready for Mashiach's arrival, for a new revolutionary period to begin. Good? Let's have a look at the Mishnah. Let the Mishnah speak for itself. The Ikvot Mashiach, which literally is a rabbinic term, which means the footsteps of Mashiach. Now that expression literally means that right before Mashiach comes, Akev means anybody know? A heel. Who in Jewish history is called Mr. Heel? Yaakov Avinu. Now Yaakov Avinu is Mr. Galut, exile, and Mr. Geula, redemption. Why is he the guy who represents that? Because he was the one, if you remember, who was chased out of the land of Israel by his twin brother Esav to go and live with his uncle Lavan, and that's where he gets married, and he has his kids, and he makes his money. Okay? So he's Mr. Galut. And if you remember, along the way, he falls asleep on a mountain. That mountain is the future site of the Beit HaMikdash. Right? Sound familiar? And he has a dream, a chalom, one of the most famous dreams in Jewish history. And what does he see the dream? He sees a sulam, a ladder going from the earth to heaven. And on the ladder he sees 4 angels, Olim v'Yordim. And it's revealed to him, and others after him, including the prophet Daniel, that these 4 angels represent the 4 exiles the Jewish people would go through. The first angel was the Babylonian angel, Bavel. Nebuchadnezzar destroys the Beit HaMikdash. Remember that? And kicks out the Jewish people. The second angel represents Paras Umadai, the Persian Median one. That's the years between the first and second temple. That's the whole Purim story. The third angel represents Yavan, Greece. The fourth, that's the whole Hanukkah story, second 200 years or so into the second temple. They kick us out of the Beit HaMikdash until we rededicate it. And the fourth and final angel he saw going up, he never saw coming down. He freaks out. And he says, Hashem, this last angel is going up, and then he coming down. And Hashem reassured him and said, I know you're freaking out. It makes sense. That represents the final 4th exile of the Jewish people by this Malchut, by this kingdom, this nation. However, even that's going to come to an end, and that's going to be the Roman Edom exile that we are, hold your horses, out of already, because we've moved into the 5th one. Okay, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So remind me later to talk about why we're not even in the 4th one anymore. We're now in the 5th exile and what that's based upon. Okay? Great. So Yaakov does the following. Watch carefully. He leaves Israel running away from anti-Semitism. Esav, the first real anti-Semite. He gets married. He has kids. He makes money. Does he make a lot of money? Tons of it. And then he goes back with Rechush Gadol back into Israel. Masa avosim elabanim. What happens to our forefathers at sign fast? We're going to do the same. Say the rabbis, we're going to leave Israel through Galut, become successful outside, and at the end of days, we're going to return to the land of Israel with great success and wealth. That is the same pattern. Why did Yaakov Avinu have this, right, revelation, and not his grandfather Avraham or his father Yitzchak? Because Avraham had a son called Yishmael. So if he would have had it, Yishmael could have been part of it, and he's not. And Yitzchak had a son called Esav. So had he had the revelation, Esav would have said, I'm also part of the redemption, but he's not. But only Yaakov Avinu was the one who was Mita Shalem, a complete bed. All his kids became the future Jewish people. So he was the one who was selected to have this revelation. Are we all clear so far? Why heel? Because when he came out of the womb, he held onto the heel of Esav. Even in English, they're on the heels of. So when Esav goes down, Yaakov comes up. So we're going to see a fall of the Christian powers and the Islamic powers that I'm going to show later at the end of days. And that's going to be one of the opinions of the Abarbanel, that the final war of Gog and Magog at the end of days, I'm throwing a lot at you, I know. I have to download the information, then we get to discussion. The final war of Gog and Magog is going to be the final battle between Bnei Ishmael and the Notzrim, Bnei Esav, the Christian Western world, that's going to be taking place in and around Israel, specifically in and around Yerushalayim. That's one of the opinions. Others say it's going to be involved with the Jewish people and all the other nations of the world who are going to come and attack us and try to control us. Sound familiar? Okay, great. That's the expression. Let's keep going. Right before Mashiach comes, we're back in the Mishnah. Chutzpah yiskeh. You're going to have a nation of young people who have tremendous chutzpah. Wow, sound familiar? I could stop the Mishnah right there. We could all go home. That's pretty much it, right? I mean, come on. Your parents or grandparents said, I don't believe the amount of chutzpah in our generation. The amount of temerity they have. It makes no sense. Right? If I would have spoken to my father, he would have given me a smack. Right? Let's keep going. Yoker Yamir. Expenses are going to rise before Mashiach comes. I guess they call that inflation, right? Hagefen titen piryo vayan biyoker. Wine is going to produce a lot of fruit. The vine is going to produce a lot of fruit, and we're going to see it. There's going to be a lot of wine available. What's that about? Says the Tiferet Yisrael, right before Mashiach comes, you're going to have alcoholism. It's going to be rampant. And I'm going to add to that drug addiction as well. There's going to be an upheaval in society, and people are going to turn to drugs and alcohol. He says, he wrote this 400 years ago. The Mishnah 2,000 years ago. Because you have a lot of alcoholism, and a lot of people are going to break down and drink. V'malchut tefach laminus. The government, now this is actually talking about in the land of Israel. But Israel, as we know, is a reflection of the rest of the world, right? There's a symbiosis, there's a synthesis between them. It's going to turn to heresy. Right? They're going to be against Torah. A great mitzvah. Literally, I'm giving you the news today, right? This is unbelievable. Ve'en tochacha. And they're not going to accept rebuke. You can rebuke the leaders and the government as much as you want. They're not going to accept it. That's what the Mishnah said. Before Mashiach comes, the government, by the way, just assuming there's a government in Israel, we haven't had one for 2,000 years. That itself is unbelievable. It's incredible. Bedvad yeleznut. The study halls are going to be used for sexual immorality. People used to go to higher place of learning in order to learn. That's going to be secondary. They're going to be about sexual immorality, leznut. Vahagalil, the north of Israel, the Galilee, Yecherav is going to be destroyed, which is happening right now as we speak. Vagavlan Yesham. Now the Gavlan is a machloket. I looked it up. What this is referring to, it means one opinion is it's another area on the west coast of Israel. It's going to come under attack and get destroyed as well. Some says reference to great scholars who are going to be destroyed, become desolate is the actual description. Va'anche gavul, people who live on the borders of Israel, Yisovavu, are going to have to travel me'ir la'ir, from city to city, v'lo yichanenu, and no one's going to care about them. It's unbelievable. It's happening right now. I was just in Eretz Yisrael a few weeks ago, and you see every hotel is full of people. Oh, what do you care? What do you do? You should be living up there anyway. The Israel, the north, the West Coast, the East Coast, the whole thing is a balagan right now. People going from town to town. And no one's going to take compassion upon them. Whatever. V'chochmot sofrim tisrach. Wisdom of Torah scholars is going to decay. V'yirechet yimasu. People who fear sin are going to be despised. People who say, I'm religious, I keep Shabbat, I believe in Hashem, I keep kosher. Right? People are going to ridicule you. Right? Being an atheist is all cool, right? That's the woke world we live in. It used to be that everyone respected the fact there's a God, and most people were God-believing individuals. Okay, maybe they wanted to kill you because you didn't believe in their God, but they're still God believers. You know what I'm saying? Now, if you come and tell me, I believe in Hashem, I believe in God, I'm like, oh my God, that's so, 1580s. You know what I'm saying? Believe those who fear sin will be despised. V'ha'emet teher ne'ederet. And the truth is going to be in pockets. It's going to be a world, says the Gemara, al-mad shikra, a world of sheker. There's going to be small pockets of truth, and it's going to be very difficult to discern who has the truth. You're going to be living in a world that's hafuch, upside down. You say black, they say white. But I can see, I don't care. That's a man, that's a woman. No. We're going to tell you what that is. You can't have an opinion. It's all up for grabs. There's no absolute truth. That's what they tell you, right? It's not absolute truth. It's up to opinion, whatever people feel like. So truth is going to be absent. Na'arim penei zakenim yalbinu. Young people are going to embarrass older people. Make their faces white, embarrass them. Usually old people are respected, but world's upside down. Zakenim yamdu b'nei katanim. Old people are going to stand in respect for young people. It used to be an old person would walk in, you have respect, and you stand up for them. No. Before Mashiach comes, Vegdo Mashiach, right before the Mashiach era begins, upside down generations. Old people to give respect to young people. Some little startup, he's an influencer, I hate that word, right? He's going to be a kadra. Oh, no, that person says respect. He runs the company, I think he's 23 and knows nothing about anything. He's going to have respect. Old people are going to be respecting them instead. Ben menavalav. A son is going to deride his father, go against his father. Bat kama be'ima. And daughters are going to rebel against their mothers. Now the next part, I'm just going to read the words. I don't know what they mean. You have your own interpretation. Kala b'chamata. A daughter-in-law is going to fight and argue with her mother-in-law. I don't know what those mean. It doesn't make any sense to me that a daughter-in-law could go against her mother-in-law or a boy could go against his mother-in-law. Let's just take it as a possibility. Oive ish anje beto. And man's enemy, says Micah is now quoting the prophet Micah, is going to be the members of his own household. Your biggest enemies are going to be out there. It's going to be your own family. And then it makes a very mysterious statement, a very famous one. I'll give you a few interpretations, but you can have your own. Pnei Hador, anyone know? Pnei HaKelev. The face of the generation is going to have a face of a dog. Now it looks like an insult. Face of a generation is going to have a face of a dog. So when I mentioned this a few weeks back, there was a young girl there, she's like, is that the prediction of dog filters on Instagram and people who are identifying as pets? Have you seen this? They're called furries. There's people who think they are a dog. By the way, there's some depth to it. Don't just mock it. I have a lot to say on this, by the way. A lot to say on this. What is this? Why do people prefer their dogs to their own family? Right? Oh, you can insult my parents, but don't mess with my dog. Why do we see that? Why is this? Dog is a kelev. Kelev is kol lev, man's best friend. There's going to be such a lack of friendship and authenticity right before Mashiach comes. There's going to be a break. You see, there's a breakdown already. That people are going to find companionship in the only creature that gives full, undiluted companionship, which is a dog. And that's why people love to come over to me and tell me about their dog and show me photos of their dog on their phone for some reason, always in a cracked screen. There's always a cracked screen. Right here, look at my dog. I'm like, I don't want to see your dog, and I don't want to see it definitely through your cracked screen. It does not interest me. But people feel connected to their own dog. Right? The Kelev, Kolev, because they're, right? One of the rabbis says something amazing. Rashi says, you know what that means? That means that people are going to act like their dogs. What do dogs do? Whatever they want. Wherever they want. right? Out in public. Used to be, you had some sick, twisted habit. You did in a locked room. Now, forget about that. I'm going to record it and put it online so everyone sees everything I say. Every disgusting comment, every video, get it out there. It's all public, nothing private anymore. That's Ikvot Mashiach. I mean, come on. Unbelievable. Rav Chanan Vassman brings down a very famous idea from Visalanta, and he says, it talks about the leaders. Who are the face of the generation? The leaders of the generation. And before Mashiach comes, there's no real leadership. They're all wimps. They just follow the masses. Just like a dog, when it's walking, walks ahead of its master, but then the master makes a left or right turn. What does the dog do? It turns its face, right? And doubles back, and then you realize that actually, who's in charge? So too, the leaders are like dogs. They're just following what everyone else wants. They have no real leadership qualities. They have no real aspirations or principles. It's like someone told me, what did Groucho Marx once say? I have many principles, but if you don't like them, I have others. That's the generation we're in. All right? So let's just summarize the Mishnah beautifully. So let's think about it. You can't trust your government. They're done. You can't trust your teacher and professors, your rabbanim, right? They're finished, right? The place of learning are gone. You can't trust your own family. You can't trust your parents. You can't trust your siblings. You can't trust your kids or your parents. What are you left with? So the Mishnah finishes with a very famous statement, which is very unlike Mishnayot in general, which is, who can we trust? Va'ami yesh lanu l'sha'en ela alavinu b'shamayim on Hashem, on God. That's what's left. Hashem is breaking down the old social order in order to bring a new order into play. That, my friends, is what we're seeing. Okay. So far, we see from the Mishnah that there are going to be major challenges which are all planned and understood are going to become. That's what Abai meant in the Gemara. Rabbi said in the Gemara, let Mashiach come, but I don't want to be there when it happens. I don't want to see this. I don't want to be part of it. Okay, that's what he meant. There's another prophet, and his name is Joel the prophet. And in chapter 3, verse, can we get scary? Are you able to handle this? You're like big boys. Okay, so Joel the prophet, by the way, I must tell you something. Before I get into this, I have many videos on Mashiach, Achrei Yamim, different aspects of it, and I'm doing a series, actually here at Safra Synagogue, on Monday nights, on Daniel the prophet. Daniel the prophet is one of the few people in world history who actually knew when Mashiach was going to come. The Gemara in Megillah tells us that that's why most of the book of Daniel is in Aramaic, and Rashi says because the secrets of Mashiach are in there, so it couldn't be in Hebrew, because then we'll be able to decipher the arrival time of Mashiach. So Yaakov knew when Mashiach was going to come. We know that, right? Because he was going to reveal it to his kids. Remember the end of the parasha? It's tatum, it's closed off. And Hashem prevented him from telling over when the end would come. But Daniel was another one. He was a great individual. Just a little bit of background. Fascinating thing. I'm going to blow your mind. Daniel the prophet was kidnapped as a child by Nebuchadnezzar. This is actually in the book of Daniel, describes this. This is not, And he was taken. Why? Because Nebuchadnezzar wanted to create a brain drain. And he took a whole bunch of young boys to Bavel when he destroyed the first temple. And he wanted to have the greatest Jewish advisors in world history. Now, we're not told how many he took, but we know 4 of them. There was Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. These 4 young boys. We're not sure how old they were. I got a feeling they were below bar mitzvah. And he dragged them off. And he gave them the best treatment. The best food, best accommodation, the best teachers. That's what he did for them. He literally created the first ever brain drain. Happens to be that he had a dream. And he wanted to have the dream interpreted. And this is actually the opening section of the book. I can't go through the entire book, but I must talk about this one dream because it's very important, because it's happening now. Listen to this dream. He turns up to all his advisors and says, I want you to interpret a dream I had last night. It really affected me. Just like Paro took on Yosef, he went to his advisors and he called all these advisors. He called philosophers, right? He called Khartoumim, he called Machshafim, where there's people who are called witches, right? Who are experts, says the Abarbanel, in talking to demons. Right? He wanted to figure out what this dream was, so he calls in these demons, he calls in the Kastians. By the way, this group of individuals, whoever they were the biggest thorn in the side of the Jewish people for millennia. And he says, who's going to interpret my dream? And the Kasdim jumped forward. And they said, we'll do it. And he says, okay, you want to do it? Give me the interpretation of my dream. And they're like, well, what was the dream? And he's like, I'm not telling you. And they're like, well, we can't do that. Who can interpret a dream without knowing what the dream was? So they thought he was just like testing them, and he was nervous that they would give a bad interpretation which would make the dream happen, which is an idea in the Gemara that the dream follows this interpretation. So they're like, no, seriously, tell us the dream, we'll interpret it. Actually, he forgot the dream. He just knew that he had a really bad chalom, a bad dream. That he knew, but he didn't remember it. So he says, if you don't tell me my dream and the interpretation, he needs both, I'm going to cut you up into pieces. And they keep fighting for their lives. And then they weren't able to do it, obviously, because who could tell you what your dream was? He kills them all. And he gets so angry, he says, I'm not going to kill all of you advisors, because none of you came forward. Daniel hears about this, he wasn't there, hears about this, and turns around to the guy who's in charge of his little thing and says, I'll do it. Get me an introduction to Nebuchadnezzar, and I'm going to interpret the dream. And I'm going to tell him what it was. And so he calls Daniel in, and he says, give me some time, I'll give you the dream and interpret it. He spends the entire time praying and praying and praying for a long time. And he says, Nebuchadnezzar, I got your dream. He was a prophet. Not everyone agrees he was a prophet, because the book of Daniel is actually the book of Ketuvim, right, in writings. But the Abarban and others say he was a prophet. Why it's there in writings is another discussion. It's not in the book of prophets, right? He says, I'll tell you a dream. You dreamt of a statue. And the statue was made of 4 metals: gold, silver, copper, and iron. And the head was gold. And the arms and chest were silver, kesef. And the belly was nochoshet, it was copper. And the legs, the lower part of the legs was, actually the top part of the legs, the yerech, which is from the hip, I think, down to the knee, was iron. And the bottom part, right, the shock was made of iron and pottery. Pottery. Clay. You with me? And he says, that's the dream? You reminded me. Tell me, Daniel, what's the interpretation? This is the interpretation. It's going to sound familiar to you. It's a reference to the 4 kingdoms that Yaakov Avinu saw in his dream. The head is Bavel, gold. Makes it feel good, right? You are the leader of gold. Fantastic. After you are going to come the Persians and the Medians. They're silver. Now, I wouldn't look at the Persians in Great Neck because they're more gold, but you know what I'm talking about. Right? You know what I'm talking about. Okay, they're going to be the silver, right? And they're going to be, by the way, later on, he actually sees them depicted as a bear. Interesting enough. More about that another time. I can't do that today, but that's interesting. And Yavan, the Greek exile, remember that's the ones who, the whole Hanukkah story, 200 years, they represent the belly made of nechoshet. Okay, the belly represents physicality. They're very into physicality, the physical world, the Greeks, the Olympics, you know what I'm talking about? Then you're going to have the Romans, Edom, Romi, and they're going to be iron, right? They're tough, right? You don't mess with the Roman Empire, right? Everyone's obsessed with the Roman Empire. But he says at the end of days, there's going to be a mix-up. And the mix-up is going to be the Bnei Yishmael, the descendants of Yishmael, the Arabs, and they're represented by the pottery, and they're going to mix up with the iron, that is the Notzrim, the Western Christian world, right, which today its epicenter is still, the Catholic Church is still in Rome, Romi, it's still there, okay, it's losing its influence, Baruch Hashem, and the two are mixed in together. In the dream, listen carefully, he took a stone, and he threw the stone in the dream. This is the dream he had. It's in the prophet. At the feet, and he smashed the pottery and clay inside the feet. And he says that's a sign that at the end of days, the Jewish people are going to come and they're going to destroy the clay, the Bnei Ishmael who are looking to hurt us. Okay? And eventually, we're going to see the final redemption. Mashiach is going to come. By the way, what's the stone represent? What's the stone? Do you remember when Yaakov had that dream? What did he sleep on? There were 12 stones. Remember that story? You've heard it before. And they argued, head on me, put your head on me. You heard this, remember this? And what did they become? One stone. Remember that? And he woke up the next morning and he realized after the dreams, there's Shar Shemaim, this is the gateway to heaven, Harabayit. And what does he do? He made a mizbeach from that stone. And he poured oil and made a special temple, right? A tribute to that stone. The Barbanel says, that's the stone that Daniel saw in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. That ended up destroying. That stone represents the Jewish people. At the end of days, we're going to win this final battle of good and evil. And there's going to be Yishmael, and there's going to be Edom involved in it. But we're going to be the final one. One last piece. So now we have 5 galuts. One second, I'll come to you 1 second. 5 galuts. We have the 4, and right at the end of days, the feet of the toes is going to be Bnei Yishmael, and they're going to cause a lot of trouble. And Rav Chaim Vital, in his commentary to Tehillim, on Tehillim number 1, 2, 4, actually says this is actually referenced by David HaMelech. Even he was aware that there's going to be a nation called Adam who are going to come and hurt us. And that's actually Pera Adam, Yishmael. In the Torah are called Pera Adam, a wild ass of a man. And they're going to come at the end of days, and they're going to attack us, and they're going to hurt us, and then we're going to cry to Hashem for all the tzarot that the Bnei Yishmael are doing to us, and Yishmael, God's going to listen to us. Beautiful name, Yishmael. And they will do teshuvah. And they get zchut. What zchut do they have to hurt us, Jewish people? We're in Eretz Yisrael. We have Torah, mitzvot. Because they pray a lot. You do know that, right? There are Bnei Yishmael right now who are praying to Hashem for our destruction. Rachmana litzlan lo aleinu. We're going to have to make sure our tefillah be their tefillah. They're ma'aminim. They believe in Hashem. Right? They're not avodah zarah. And they do brit milah. Although they're lo mesuva oseh. They're not commanded to. They still get zchut for that. And he says that's why they have Harabayit right now in Olam Hazeh. But we're going to get in Olam Haba. And we're on the cusp of that. Yeah.
Continuing that theme, you say Simanavot Nevanim.
Masa vosim alabanim, yeah.
So within the final days of when Abraham was buried, like
That's right. That's right.
So if there is any estira in dream saying that we're gonna win the battle and we're gonna whatever destroy this, or is it that winning the battle means that there are the good Arabs left?
They are gonna
be with us.
Great question. Okay, just to repeat the question in English, although that was English. Okay, let me just say, no, it's good. Okay, the point you're making is, the point that's being made is that we know that Yishmael did teshuvah at the end of his life. Okay? And we know that because Yishmael ended up burying his father Avraham Avinu. So we know he did teshuvah. And the rabbis say that's a sign, and they're going to do teshuvah. There is good and bad in Yishmael. There's actually good and bad in Esav. Right? I mean, we live in the Western world, America, and this is actually the good Sheba Esav. There's also bad in Esav. We've seen that, right? Who they are is a discussion we can have as well. There's also good and bad in Yishmael. There's people who want us to be successful among Yishmael. We started to make peace with them recently, and we did for a long time, right? The old Abraham Accords. We'll see the bad in Yishmael, that we're dealing with Hamas, Hezbollah. Says the Prophet Yosef, at the end of days, they're going to do teshuvah. The form of their teshuvah is a mystery we don't know. But I want to just jump, if you don't mind, to the Prophet Yoel. The Prophet Yoel talks about the final battle of Gog and Magog, and he gives, I'm going to scare you a little bit, but I'm going to preamble this because I don't want you freaking out, or your wives or girlfriends calling me. I have enough problems in my life, Baruch Hashem. Every negative prophecy that is given does not have to happen. I'll say that again. Whenever a prophet has a negative prophecy, saying bad's going to happen, it does not need to happen. Oh, but the prophet said it. How can it not be true? Because we have teshuvah, tefillah, tzedakah, gumel chasadim. We can be ma'avir in Torah gezerah. We can get rid of it. A positive prophecy, that must happen. Okay. With that in mind, that's the words of the Rambam. Let's have a look what Yoel says, chapter 3, verse 3. V'natati moftim b'shamayim. I'm going to put great signs in the heavens, of Aris, on the land. Dam, blood. Esh, fire. V'timrot ashen, pillars of smoke. So the commentator is trying to figure out what Yoel is talking about is going to happen during this battle of Gog and Magog. Okay, sounds like a physical war. And according to Yechezkel, the prophet, Ezekiel, and we're going to see there's two prophecies that talk about the battle of Gog and Magog. We're going to do those in a second. And one from Zechariah as the third prophecy. Okay, we know there's going to be physical battles happening in and around Israel and around Jerusalem specifically right before Mashiach comes. We're seeing them now. We're seeing them now, as I'm going to show you. Actually, according to the Midrash Tehillim, says actually these three prophecies of Yechezkel, and Zechariah represent three wars. A world war, a second world war, and then a final world war. Okay, with that said, I want to just double click on this final two words that I mentioned to you, Timrot Ashan, pillars of smoke. How do you say a pillar of something? How do we normally say a pillar? An amud, right? An amud, a column, right? An amud is usually. What's Timrot? Timrot comes from Tamar. What's Tamar? A date. So the expression over here is there could be a battle that ends up with a date palm of smoke, which could well be the ancient way of saying a mushroom cloud. Based upon this, there are other rabbis that I should put down in my book, Lud the Vilna Gaon and Rav Chavetz Chaim. It says the final battle is going to take, some say 3 hours, and some say a matter of minutes. Lo aleinu. Okay, and by the way, go back hundreds of years, no battle lasted for a few minutes, right? Battles took months, years, or decades, right? The final battle could, lo aleinu, take a few minutes for it kicks in. Okay, that's Timrot Ashan, a date palm of smoke, lo aleinu, that could become, lo aleinu, part of the final battle. Okay. With that said, if you're not scared enough, where's it going to come from? So Ezekiel the prophet, I'm giving you a lot of information, by the way. Ezekiel the prophet tells us the names of the nations that are going to attack us as part of Gog and Magog. Okay? And we don't know who these nations are. We're not too sure. Right? It's up for interpretation. And many of the rabbis try to figure out who these nations are. But there is one nation that is mentioned that we do know who they are and where they are. And that is Paras, Persia. Cush, not too sure. Put, somewhere maybe in Africa. And it mentions a few others. But Paras is modern day Iran. And as you all know, modern day Iran since 1979 at least has become what is probably the foremost Islamist, jihadist, messianic death cult in the world. I say that again. Islamist, jihadist, messianic. They are a massive messianic cult. You don't realize that. Much of what they're doing around the world, especially the land of Israel, is to push the envelope in order to bring Mehdi, which is their version of Mashiach, and they're a death cult as well. They don't care what needs to happen or how many people are lost in order to bring their version of Mashiach, the Mehdi. Okay? They're waiting for the next incarnation, and they believe that they're the forefront. You're not going to understand what's happened in the Middle East without understanding this. So that's the only one. Now, the Malbim, if I'm not mistaken, says that this expression of Paras isn't limited to just Persia or modern-day Iran. Actually, all Bnei Ishmael are going to come at the end of days in order to hurt us. That's what he says. Okay? That's what we're going to be dealing with, Ba'acharit Yamim, at the end of days. Okay? Comes along David HaMelech, because he's the one who set Yerushalayim up, really, officially, as the capital of Israel, and decided that Beit HaMikdash would be built on that mountain that Abraham brought Yitzchak as a korban, and Yaakov had the dream. So David HaMelech, although he wasn't allowed to build the temple, talks about it because his son Shlomo did. And he says in Tehillim that we read every single day. These words will sound familiar, they're part of Shacharit. Boneh Yerushalayim Hashem, God is the builder of Yerushalayim. Nidchei Yisrael Yikanes, the dispersed members of Yisrael are going to enter. That's what David HaMelech says. What does that mean? God is to build Jerusalem, and the dispersed members of Israel are going to return. Says Rashi and the other prophets. Not that Rashi was a prophet, but he had Ruach HaKodesh. And they say that when you see Yerushalayim is full, packed, that it's almost difficult to walk through the streets, crowded, and no room, he says. Yelehem makom tsar livnot lehem batim. No room to even start to build more homes. Nidche Yisrael HaKanes. That is a sign that Mashiach and the end of days, which we already defined means peace, is going to actually come to the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael finally. What's the connection? Why would there be a sign that the David HaMelech mentions it and Rashi explains it? Because he's king. And you can't tell him like, hello, I'm king of my city, and there ain't anyone there. Like cricket, 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 you know what I'm saying? It's like empty. So before Mashiach comes, there has to be an upheaval of society we spoke about. There may have to be battles to get rid of the final evil that exists in this world. And, most importantly, we need inhabitants of the land of Israel. I mean, think Machane Yehuda, Erev Shabbat. I was just there. Although, it was painful. It was still full, but painfully empty. I spoke to people in Machane Yehuda, which I love. We stayed very close to there. I got an Airbnb with my family. And I tell you, they said that business in Yerushalayim is down 60%. 60% down, Rahman Aslan. These are very challenging times. But I believe this is what they're talking about. I believe that's what they're talking about. We do know, and we'll finish with this, we'll have so much more to say, but I'll be re-invited to give you a lot more information. We know the Balaturim tells us something fascinating. There's a pasuk that describes Yishmael. Okay? Yishmael. And it says, Al pnei kol achav nafal. He falls upon all of his brothers. And then the next pasuk begins, Ve'ele toldot Yitzchak. These are the generations of Yitzchak. Okay? So the Balaturim says these two Pesukim are next to each other because they're related. It's a concept used many times in Torah called samuch. When two verses or two ideas are near each other in the Torah, they're connected somehow. You don't always see the connection. And Rashi has to come along and help us see the connection, right? Like the Meraglim, for example, right? And Miriam, they say they should have learned about Lashon Hara from her. Those are two separate topics and incidents, but they're next to each other. They can be learned out one from the other. That's a famous samuch concept. He says the same thing over here. When you see the Bnei Ishmael start to be defeated, Ele Toldot Yitzchak, now it's time for Yitzchak to lift up his head. Now it's time for the Jewish people to finally get pride, be successful, and now the generation of Yitzchak, okay, are going to be lifted up as Rat Hashem, and we're going to take prominence in the land of Israel as Rat Hashem with the coming Biat of Mashiach. That's how he describes it. What is Gog and Magog? We'll finish off with this. Gog, so we don't know who they are exactly, although I think proved it to you, it's definitely the Arab nations, they're definitely going to be part of it. Gog, Rashi and others say, is the name of the individual, Gog, he's the leader, and Magog is his nation. Some say Gog is one nation, one person, and Magog is actually the rest of the other nations, the 70 nations of the world. The world is divided up into 70 nations, right? Shiva Munot. Now we have more because they're divided up, but there's 70 core nations throughout the entire world. United nations who are going to come and stand against Eretz Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael, the Jewish people in Israel. Rav Hirsch says there's also a clue in the name Gog and Magog. Gog is the same word as Gog, a roof. And Magog are those people against the roof. Who are the roof people? What roof are we talking about? So he says, at the end of days, you're going to see atheism is going to spread throughout the entire world. And the Rambam, by the way, based on another prophecy of Daniel, talks about this and says you're going to see a wave of atheism spread through the world before Mashiach comes. Once again, getting rid of the old order so the new order can begin. And he says that Gog is Gog, refers to people who put their belief in the safety of their own powers, their roof. See that? We, the Jewish people, we don't put our powers on the roof. We are the people of the sukkah, right? We're the non-roof people, right? We're like, what is a sukkah? It's a flimsy, leaky, disconnected vegetation roof. We put our faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. See, he learns out from this that really, whatever this battle is going to be, and it's happening right now, it's raging in the land of Israel as we speak. This final battle, the winning side, B'ezrat Hashem, is going to be the one, and even the individuals within our nation who succeed are going to be the ones who put their faith in Hashem at the end of the Mishnah. Who are going to be? Trust ela al avinu shebashamayim, on our God in heaven. That's what you have to have. That's why emunah, faith in Hashem, is the most important thing we can do. And Shabbat, in order to protect ourselves, another discussion off and now, in order to protect ourselves against this final battle of Gog and Magog, before Mashiach comes, takes on the battle for us. You could be fighting the battle for us right now, because there must be a potential Mashiach available at any minute on deck. So right now we know for a fact there is a Mashiach who's there, ready to go. And whether he has the merit to reveal himself, whether this is a window of opportunity that we can grab, that's in Hashem's hands. But we have the ability, the power to expedite it. That's the Achishena word of Isaiah the prophet, chapter 60. So through our good actions, our emunah, and specifically Shabbat and Tefillah, that's two main things. Why is another discussion that we're going to be able to have to work on in order to bring Mashiach earlier. It should happen, B'ezrat Hashem, b'mehera, b'yamenu. Amen. 45 minutes on the dot. Any questions, thoughts, or comments on anything we discussed? You should have a bunch, I would have thought. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to ask you correctly, but I once heard also there was an idea that God's like thoughts.
What?
The word for like thoughts in Hebrew, I don't know, I don't speak Hebrew, but like, I'm not sure what his thoughts, but someone said to me once, I learned it, they said that there's an idea of...
Hegion is a thought, hegion.
Okay, maybe something like that.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the idea of Gog and Magog, everyone thinks it's like a war, it's like whatever type of war it is. There's an idea that it's in each and one of our minds.
Yeah.
That we're fighting it.
Oh, without doubt, without doubt. That's based also very much so, that there's going to be a physical battle, a spiritual one, and everyone's going to have to, that's the idea of the breakdown of society, everyone's going to be dealing with their own personal Amalek. We have to talk about them too, because they're going to be part of this whole production, and we're seeing it now. I mean, Amalek used to be hiding in the shadows. Now they're literally just coming forward and telling you, we're going to kill you. All right, they're fighting us in our synagogues, even in America. It's gone crazy. Okay? Amalek is not one nation. They're now spread out among the entire world. But yeah, they talk about the inner Amalek that's going to attack us. You know, I went to very Haredi yeshivot my entire life, right? Ashkenazi yeshivot. And they always spoke about that aspect of it more than the wars, right? Because they don't want to talk about Israel and wars and stuff. But if you just cursory glance through the Tanakh, it's all physical wars. You know, it's black and white. It's probably why they don't teach you Tanakh in yeshivot, unfortunately. You know, it's all Gemara, right? And they try to stay away from it. But that's a great and grave mistake. I had to play catch-up after I left yeshiva, sadly enough. Okay, B'ezrat Hashem, it's all going to be good, yeah.
So what is the individual war that everyone sort of faces, the inner Amalek?
Yeah, on each person. Each person is going to have to deal with the Yetzer Hara that is defined by Amalek that wants to destroy us. It's going to be much stronger. The challenges and tests. You want me to give you examples of how the challenge people are facing that's causing them to despair, be depressed, take medication, be involved in addictions, go through nervous breakdowns, have no faith in themselves, lose their faith in Hashem. I mean, we're seeing it all. You name it, we're seeing it, brother. This is mamash, what the Mishnah is talking about, an absolute breakdown of society. People used to know who they were. They had faith, they believed in Hashem, they felt good. You know, think about grandparents. I don't know, most people's grandparents are chashuv, important, they dressed a certain way, they felt good, right? They had a mission, and now people are shmagekis. You know, people are just losing any real faith or a belief in themselves. I could talk about divorce rates.
Yeah.
This is...
Is it an ego thing then?
Is ego part of it? We know Amalek is defined by ego as well. I would definitely put that part of it. We know that ego is one of the worst traits, the Rambam says, that brings down society. It's Motsin Adam Me'olam, knocks a person out of this world, Ga'ava. Yeah. But I say the opposite's a bigger problem. People suffering from chronic and debilitating low self-esteem, which is a product, if you ask me, of what we're seeing. Everyone's looking in society, seeing each other, everyone's better than me, look better looking than me, and, you know, presenting themselves in a certain way. I mean, social media is having a major impact on the world in this sense as well.
Spoke about it last week in this chasing honor.
Chasing honor, yeah. Yeah, one of the worst things takes a person out of this world, yeah. But people need to have good self-esteem in our generation, right? I think it's a lack of ego rather than anything else. Sure.
Is there a source that says that the land of Israel will not be taken by force? And does the current iteration of the land of Israel contradict that source and create a bit of tension between certain religious believers and secular society?
Okay, there's a lot in that question. That was a very deep question. Okay, okay. So I'm not sure exactly how to address that, but I will say the following. I'm going to speak about it. I'll be on Shabbat, and I'm going to be speaking about Mashiach ben Yosef. Mashiach ben Yosef. So I'm just going to mention that right now, just as a segue into my Shabbat speech, Shabbat afternoon if you're around. We know, according to the rabbis, there's going to be a period before Mashiach ben David. That's the Mashiach we're speaking about. Talking about Mashiach ben David. That's the final king, who's going to be a physical person, flesh and blood, direct son of King David, who's going to make his kingship in Eretz Israel, in Yerushalayim, and lead us to defeat these enemies, win our wars, and start world peace. We do know there's something called Mashiach ben Yosef. Now, Mashiach ben Yosef does not necessarily have to be a person. And Rav Kook and others say this is a reference to a period of time. It's an epoch. And he says it's a reference to Zionism. The secular Jews and religious Jews, because there were many religious people too, who came back to Israel, and they're going to help establish, and he actually mentions Herzl. He got into a little bit of trouble for this, because they were like, oh, you're saying Herzl's Mashiach ben Yosef. He didn't say that. He said that he represents a leadership of this epoch, this time of Mashiach ben Yosef, and they're going to come, and they're going to be defeated, and they're going to fall right before Mashiach ben David comes. But they're going to be a necessary prelude to Mashiach ben David's arrival. That's it in a nutshell. That's the only thing I've seen on it. Oh, that's a pretty big one. There's a lot more to say on Mashiach ben Yosef, if you look at the writings of Rav Kook, which I did. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Azako Baruch.